application and benefits of the 6-week look ahead within the last planner system. This will be presented by Niall Stone from Designer Group. If you have a question, please type it on the webinar and we will consolidate and ask Niall in the second half. If there are any questions that we don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up by email afterwards. The agenda will be as follows: opening introduction by Richard Fitzpatrick, the presentation by Niall Stone, followed by questions and answers. I will now hand you over to Richard. Richard, are you there?
Yes, I lost connection there for a minute. Apologies for that.
No problem. You can go ahead now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you indeed, Susan, and thank you to everybody for joining our Lean Construction Iron webinar this afternoon, our November webinar, which is entitled The Last Planner System, the Practical Application and Benefits of the 6-week Look Ahead. Those you were able to join us last month in September will have seen the presentation on the Last Planner System from David Umstath and Paul Ebbs. And what Lean Construction Iron now is holding a series of 3 webinars, which will focus on 3 key elements. The first one being the practical application of the 6-week look ahead. Our key speaker is Niall Stone. Niall is Director of Engineering with the Designer Group, one of Ireland's leading electrical contractors. Niall holds a degree in electrical engineering, information technology, and an MSc in information systems, and he leads the engineering division within Designer Group. Niall is a champion of a collaborative approach using BIM modeling technologies within Designer Group, and he leads the Lean initiative within that organisation as well. Niall sits on the leadership group of Lean Construction Iron, and we're delighted to have Niall with us today to present on the practical application, the 6-week look ahead, which Designer use on their projects. So if I can hand over to yourself, Niall, and let you run ahead with the presentation, it'd be great. Thanks, Niall.
Thank you very much, Richard. So I'll try to be as brief as possible. We have half an hour, so welcome everybody who's online. And I'll start with the first slide, which points out that really we need to thank Paul Ebbs and David Umstath for the 11th webinar, which highlighted a kind of an overall snapshot and a good detailed review of the last planner system. As a result of that process that we followed, we have maintained and kept some slides from that to kind of keep some flow all the way through. So I'll go through the sheets now. Yeah, so the first webinar dealt with the 5 levels, and within those 5 levels we have established that there are 8 elements within the system. And the next 3 webinars that, as Richard pointed out, we'd hope to flesh out and work at a different level, a more detailed level, of the practical applications of some of those other elements. So as I said, we've used some of the slides from the previous presentation. We want to maintain the momentum and familiarity that we gained from the previous exercise. So the last planner, the previous webinar. So just a quick highlight, a quick summary of that, what we gained from that. We saw the benefits of the last planner system, the better outcomes, more reliable plans, enhanced collaboration, more trust, freed up capacity. And again, that information, webinar number 11 is available on the LPS website. We looked at the development of the last planner system and how it came about in 1990 and Glenn Ballard and how, and we looked at the industrial averages that came out of that. We looked at the role of the last planner system in Lean project development, and we saw it's the backbone of Lean project development. And we looked at the processes within that of should, can, will, do, learn. And we discussed briefly the plan, do, check, act that came out of that. So it's not just good enough to plan, you have to check, you have to do it, and you have to see where you went wrong, and you have to take action off the back of that and improve those processes. We looked at the reliability side of things, that's understanding promises and what a promise is. So break things up into doable, manageable promises, commitments, make them and complete them within a reasonable time frame. Document that. As a result of that, you get better plan reliability. Your planned activity complete should improve. That's the idea. And you just really want to help the planning process by making more achievable tasks, but committing to doing them as well. And we explored the structure of the LPS systems, and we looked at the 8 different elements of the last planner system. So the early research that came out of the last planner, initially back in the 90s, it showed overall we had 54% planned activity complete. So 4 men, in essence, their plans were about, they committed and they achieved about 54% of the tasks they set out to do, not productivity, the tasks they set out to do. The project completed when planned was 41%, project completed budget cost 68%, 7-day actions per 100,000 employed was 421, and a median profit before tax 2.5%. So that's just a quick summary to bring us up to speed, so we can take it from there. So this was revisited in 2016. So Ballard and Tomalin revisited their earlier works, was Ballard's earlier works, and they set out the 8 elements. They defined the functions and spaced that out and went into each of the functions and basically gave a rough description of where the whole thing fits together. The principles and the rules about sharing, collaboration, they discuss, making a plan, keeping it in public, don't start tasks that you can't complete, don't be unrealistic, but stress the plans as well at the same time, and maintain a workable backlog. This has to be doable and achievable, and the whole planning system, when it fits together, is to make our tasks doable and achievable. I've just lost the screen there. Guys, I just lost the screen. Apologies. I got
sorry, no, that's my fault, Niall. I was trying to make a full screen there.
You've made it, but I've lost the control. Sorry.
Or if you use the arrows on your computer, you should be able to flick through and back. Then, sorry about that.
No, I don't have. Okay, review the process. Okay, we'll take it that way. That's fine. I got it back there.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So we went through the methodologies and we looked at and the processes that we looked at: should, can, will, do, and we looked at the different plans, the pull plans and the look ahead plans, and we saw how one plan fed into the next, and we discussed and we had a look at the increased detail every time you plan. Don't be afraid to replan. Initially, when you do your master plans, the tasks are looser. As you move down through look ahead plans and weekly plans, they get more detailed, manageable, precise, smaller tasks that are easier to do, and constraint schedules that break down to make plans easier to achieve. All of this is to improve enhanced plan reliability. I have just included a link there on the webinar. It's available, and that is the current benchmark from 2016. So it's important to follow that benchmark as best as possible, because a lot of people don't, and they add their own bits and pieces. But if you get the best out of this, if you could master this before you start adding your own twists, it's always best. So from that process, the last planner system of control, they're really showing how you move through the plans and how one process feeds the next. So this is really the work that was used by the guys last month, and we had produced the 8 elements then from that, and they are master planning. That's going to be a schedule, I think, next month. It's going to be the next webinar. Phase planning, make ready processes, which is what we're looking at here. We're looking at the last planner, the weekly meetings, weekly working plans, daily production plan meetings, all in around the weekly working plan and small achievable tasks. The dashboards, keeping it collaborative, keeping it visible, all achievable. Improvement projects, coming back from the information that we've got, reasons for failure, examining why we didn't achieve what we planned to achieve, and to improve those standardized processes from a basis of standardization. Now, this is the sheet that Paul Ebbs had in his last webinar, and we've borrowed this and the next one and one more as well. So we want to keep the familiarity here. So obviously milestone and phase planning, and we are focusing in on the make ready plan. And the make ready plan sits really in between your pull plan, your master plan, and your weekly plans. So it receives information from your pull plans, your master plans, and its function mainly, as well as to get moving and drive constraints and commitments to help the weekly plan, so that the weekly plans are easier to achieve and our plan reliability increases. So make ready plans, it has a look ahead plan, ready to work or ready to build. Breaking my own rules, some people call it ready to build. Identify the constraints. So what are the constraints? Break a task. What do we need to complete this task? Whatever that task is, what are the steps? Who is involved? Who solves them? We commit to resolving those. We have the right people in the room at the time, and they make a commitment to resolving those different steps. We look at the constraints log, so we record those constraints and we break them down. We look at them and we set them aside, and people are make a commitment to resolving small parts of an overall problem. And when we review the make ready plan and the constraints logs, when all those pieces are achieved, when all the boxes go green, that's ready to go, that's ready to build, we're ready to complete that task. So the aim of the make ready plan is to be able to start an activity when it's planned to start at either master plan or weekly planner level. So that's the whole aim of our planning system here. And the question is, do we have everything we need to start the work? So when we come up with a particular task that we have to complete in construction, we need to ask ourselves, what do we need to make this work? When we discuss those needs come down into constraint schedules. They're the tasks, they're the commitments we ask people to make to resolve those individual components of that overall task, so we can start work. We're ready to go. So this is an example. It's another sheet. This is the ready to build plan, because they're reviewing this. So in many cases, you're going to have a weekly planner, which we haven't fully looked at yet. We have to start somewhere, and this is the logical order it follows. So we have had an overview of the whole system. But when you have a master plan, you'll have tasks that could be up to 12 weeks ahead of schedule. When you're doing your 6 to 8 week look ahead, you need to take those tasks and plan them in greater detail. That's one of the principles of the LPS system, that as you progress through the processes of planning, that each item is planned to a greater detail than when you initially mentioned it or put it up on the sheet. There shouldn't be too much detail up on the, certainly detail increases as you approach the weekly planner sessions. So when you come to your 6 to 8 week weekly plan, you need to be taking some information from those master plans, full plans, to put into, well, we think we're going to need this in 8 weeks' time. Some people would view the 6 to 8 week plan as an important process for saying, if this was 6 weeks' time and we were running a weekly plan, what would we expect to be doing in 6 to 8 weeks' time? So you can run in your head a mini weekly plan session to say, if it was 6 to 8 weeks' time, what would we be planning for next week? And you put up all the constraints, you put the items up, and then the overall theory is that we can achieve a lot in construction in 6 to 8 weeks. Most tasks that we come across in construction are achievable and doable within 6 to 8 weeks. 1 week is too short, but 6 to 8 weeks should be enough time for us to achieve what we need to achieve and get the different levels of permission, get whatever we need to get done over the line so we can complete our tasks. Now, I have a video here from Lean Construct. It's basically a quick demonstration of a ready to build look ahead plan and progress. It doesn't take long. But what it shows is the collaboration, and it shows the engagement, and it shows what's necessary for these plans to actually work, because the collective intellect is very important in both acknowledging, recognizing, and fixing these issues. So a lot of dynamics going on, a lot of movement, tasks written on post-its, things being moved from 1 week to the next. It's a brief video, but you need to have the right people in the room. It's about a minute long, and you can see people come in and out, they engage, they disengage. Some people just observe, but they're there, they're taking in information, they're offering advice. No one's operating in isolation. Everything is visible. The principles are there. It's collaborative. It's in public view. It's shared. It's collective knowledge. It's probably a whole subcontractor team there for a main contractor. I'll move on. So when we come up with the tasks that we would hope to be achieving in 6 to 8 weeks' time, those tasks are broken down into different sections, commonly occurring sections. And just like weekly planner, where we have very frequently occurring reasons why we can't complete tasks, where we're trying to stress a plan and find out why we're failing, we also have a pretty standardized approach to what we need to do, what are the inputs, what are the prerequisites, what information do we need. So if we had a task that we needed to complete in the construction site, we would regularly need to know, was the contract in place? Is the design checked? Have we any RFIs relating to this issue that aren't resolved yet? This in the middle here is just a blown up version of the smaller sheet at the back so we can see it. So we reference a task, and that could be referenced on the post-it. We reference number 58 or whatever, and then we name that task. We name its trade, and we put a comment against it. And the object is to get the plan is to get everything green, to make that ready to go, ready to build. And the constraint schedule is a list of tasks to bring that to ready to build status. So we also have to look at stuff like weather, at the prerequisite tasks, everything that needs to be done, completed. If we're putting in pipe work, are the stud walls in? If are we before raised access ceilings go in, or all the services put in beforehand that need to go in there above it? Do we have access to those areas? Can we get into them? Then you start to see some familiarity with the last planner, the weekly planner, the labor. Do you have the labor? Do you have the materials? Do you have the plant? And it's not a coincidence that when you do your weekly planner sessions, some of these things here are the reasons why you didn't achieve a plan. So I didn't have the labor, I didn't have the materials, I didn't have the tools, and I didn't have the information, which here is broken down into 5. So all these things are set in place to try and help us to achieve and produce better weekly plans and plan overall, and get the reliabilities of our plan, those averages to increase so we plan better. This would be something we would have in our own job. It's just a brief sample. It would be, for example, we'd have a job for evacuate new routes, erect boundary fencing. And we see there that we have some design issues, and we also have a design on finding new routes. So you can see there that some of these issues here, like the electrical distribution, the design, RFIs are all answered, the design is signed off, the contract is in place, you have the tools, you have the man, you have everything. So when you come to plan to do that in 6 to 8 weeks' time, you should be in a position where you can complete that task. And obviously the erecting the scaffolding issue, which is down the end, you're not in any position to erect any scaffolding, and you need to break that. You need to assign people to achieve all those different elements, get the design done, get whatever method statements you have, answer and address any method statements, and then move on from there and deal with each issue in an achievable, manageable way. And you do that in the collaborative approach. You have the right people in the room, you have your engineers in the room to handle the design issues, you have your project managers to make sure that they have their orders in place, that they have the labor in place. They know for a look ahead when they do their labor meetings, for example, they know I have I've work coming on down the line here. I need extra men on this job. So you're hopefully, you can deal with your S curves on labor, and they won't peak so much at the end of the job because you're handing areas over in smaller chunks earlier. You're commissioning and you're achieving items and elements of the plant construction completely, and they're ready to go, ready to build, and when they're built, they're finished. And obviously a key thing here is rework. So a lot of these issues here, RFI is not answered, design information not signed off. When we go through a process and complete a task without addressing those issues up front, often they can happen, and they not getting sign off, not getting your design checked off, can often become the reason why we didn't achieve the ready to build status. We did it anyway, and we ended up with rework to go and address a design issue or an RFI issue. A quick item here would be assigning those tasks. We talk about promises and commitments and assigning these things. This is just a small thing on Google Docs, but whatever system you use, people can fill these out by hand. They can do whatever they want. Most of the people use Post-its up on for the wall plans, and they maintain some sort of a spreadsheet element here. This is a good way inside Google Docs. Microsoft Office has a similar system where you can take a cell and inside a sheet like that and assign it to somebody, and it'll come up as one of their tasks. There are many tasks to do, and when they resolve that issue, they can resolve it from their email window, and it resolves it back into that task. So there's no, it cuts out in communication. It's very lean. They know the task, they go in, it's assigned to them, and their job is to turn that N into a Y. And it's just some system like that where these things are moved on. So when you go into the meeting, that's just a Y, and there's no time wasted going through turning N's to Y's. You're only dealing with the N's, only dealing with the no's. Same with last planner. Your focus on the weekly plans is what you didn't achieve, not what you did achieve. It could be a hard message to get across sometimes because it seems harsh, but that's what you're dealing with. You're focusing all your time on preparing this work to be completed, to be done, not going over past victories and what you did do and great job you did in doing it. So the benefits of the make ready planning. So we avoid delays and disruptions, and obviously in that comes from the whole principle of the whole last planner system, but this helps in that regard. A classic one would be a large piece of plant to be put up on the roof. Often they would require road closure certificates, crane haulage. All those sort of things can cause havoc if they are planned last minute or within 1 or 2 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks is plenty of time for everybody to be aware, to plan, the notices be in place, and other trades can be out of those areas, and they can adhere to their plan Bs or make a plan B and be out of those areas, and you're not going to be disrupting other people in other trades, and you're not going to be a reason for a prerequisite task not being completed for somebody else in their last planner system. So it supports teamwork. It supports teamwork because it brings all the trades together on an equal footing. As you said, we've got public views of the plans. People are interacting with each other. It's a collaborative approach, and it supports all of that, and it's a shared knowledge approach. It maximizes productivity. So once again, we're looking at the labor. We know when we're going to, we can see spikes in labor. We look at plans that have a high labor requirement coming down the line in 6 to 8 weeks. We can plan for that, and we can move around that, and we can plan our tasks so that we have the labor on site and not waiting around to do work. That when that work is ready to go and we know we're going to do it in 6 to 8 weeks, we get the labor in place and we do it. Everything else is in place, no hold-ups. We ensure that we have everything in place to start the work on time. That's an easy one. Issues can be highlighted and addressed before work commences rather than when the task commences. We've already highlighted that one as well. So it supports the weekly planning process. It's very important. It does support the weekly planning process because it makes the weekly planning process, it's not your first time hearing about it. Not all the time the people at weekly planning processes, not all the time everybody who's at those was involved in the pull plan. You can say they should be, and that's fair enough, but sometimes 12 weeks have passed and you have different people in the room. But the 6 to 8 weeks, where you consistently look at 6 to 8 weeks time, those people should be in the room who do the weekly planning room, or some of them the key ones anyway, to make that weekly planning process more meaningful and more achievable. It helps to increase the planned activity rate. That's so we're looking for a planned activity complete rate. That stands to reason. If you make your plans easier and your tasks easier to achieve, and you set in place plans to make sure they happen, and you have your resources and material, obviously your plan reliability is going to increase, and your capacity should increase as well. There's a couple of slides in here just about the trademark for using last planner. We tried to keep the registered trademark icon going all the way through it. We won't lead on, but it is, this last planner system is trademarked as the LCI at the leanconstruction.org. It's their system. It's there's links up there for benchmarks, and you can get the tools. It's all up on those sites, but it is their information. And just have a couple of slides on that. A little bit more information here will be further information. This you'll have to go for that current benchmark process. I gave the link to that, I think, up on slide 8 or 9. It's up at the start of the presentation. That's free to download. It's about, I think it's about 40 pages, and it goes through references. It's a very, very, very useful document, and it's a very useful document to know, particularly the principles, the processes, the rules, the functions. If you concentrated on those particular sections, you can handle an awful lot of misdirected comments, and you can bring people back into the room. You can tell them to stop planning the wrong way. Don't plan to fail, only plan to do things you do. If you know something isn't going to be ready, don't put it down on the plan. It's not part of the principles. Look, it's on page whatever, and have a look. The Lean Construction Institute, we have that there. We have our own Lean Construction in Ireland sitting in the middle. We kept the Lean Construction blog from last week. Paul Ebbs, obviously, as I think he's the set that up or had a large part of it. And we have Lean Construct in there. They gave us some of the videos. Steve Ward gave us some of the videos of actual make ready plans in progress going ahead. As myself, I thank you all for, it was a long half hour, and we had a lot to get through in that space of time. So hopefully we've fleshed out one particular element of the last planner system. And we're going on to Richard for Q&A.
Right. Thank you, Niall, for that presentation, and appreciate you putting all that together. I think hopefully people found that a useful presentation on the look ahead and the approach that's taken by Designer Group in applying the principles of the last planner system, which was shared with us last month by David Umstaff and Paul Ebbs, as Niall mentioned. For those who have any questions, obviously you can type them in. Susan will mention how you can post those onto the webinar. I do have a couple of questions that have come through here now, if I can run them by you and see if you wouldn't mind answering them.
Okay.
There's a question here that when you say the level of planning per task should increase in detail as we move through the planning process, what does that mean in practical terms?
I think in practical terms, you'd say that really when you're up at master plan or pool plan, you might put something down. We go back to the large lift of a particular piece of plant onto a roof, a generator or a large air handling unit. That up at the very start of the process would be one posted large plant lifted onto the roof. As we move down through the different processes, the plans and the functions of the LPS system, when we reach the look ahead system, we see that's coming online now in 6 to 8 weeks. But then you start going, okay, I now need to plan in greater detail than I did to the process beforehand, which is the master plan or pool plan or whatever process plan, whatever plans you had in place before that. It is now, as you get closer to the date, you plan in greater detail. So another example of that would be, just to take it through the whole process, if you were installing pipework. At the top level, you would have installed pipework to the building. As you move to the 4 to 6 week plan, to make ready plan, you want to see if the design is ready. You want to see if it's signed off, if you have the equipment, if you have the manpower, and you have all those different things that we've already highlighted in the constraint schedule. So those, whatever, 10, 12 items, have those ready. You don't have those on the pool plan, you have them on your 6 to 8 week plan. When you go then in 6 to 8 weeks time or 7 weeks time, when you're making your plan, your weekly plan for the week ahead, you have an item that has moved already through 2, maybe 3 different planning processes, and you are now at the stage where you're planning to do it the next week. You may choose to break that task up and say, I'm going to install the pipe work on the ground floor. I'm going to install the pipe work on the first floor the next week. You may break those tasks down into manageable, doable tasks, maybe 2 or 3 days work, 3 to 4 days max. Don't stretch into the next week. So those large tasks are broken down into smaller details, the individual components and overall hierarchy of the design and RFIs and all that sort of stuff, material compliance, that's all addressed by a constraint schedule from your 6 to 8 week look ahead. And then when you get down to actually doing it, you can break it down into manageable, doable tasks. So you don't say to yourself, you don't set in your weekly task a plan to do something that takes a month. You break those, you break that monthly workload down into doable tasks that all fit inside the weekly planning process. Does that answer that, Richard?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very comprehensive response. I mean, clearly it sets out there is flexibility. 6 week look ahead does give you that flexibility to get the best use out of your resource and looking for constraints that are going to affect the management of the works, which which is absolutely what you need to do when you're working on site. Keep the flow of the work, a flow of information going, which is important. Another question has come through here, Niall, is the use of the last planner system and the look ahead more beneficial for the main contractor or the subcontractor?
I think that can depend on who you ask and your attitude towards lean construction. If you support lean construction, you'd probably say it's more beneficial to whatever trade whatever discipline you work in. But you have a tendency that when people don't support it on the services side, they'll often say this won't work unless the main contractor has buy-in. And if you say and you think it won't work unless the main contractor buys in, well then you're right, because you have the wrong attitude and it won't work, it'll fail. But you can make this work for yourself, because regardless in the services, we have subcontractor teams ourselves. So within the M&E industry, particularly on the mechanical side, you've got specialist pipe work, specialist services, you've got sprinklers, you've got all, well, it's a different service in itself, but you've got all controls, BMS systems. So you have a supplier subcontract chain yourself that you can have in the room, you can have a collaborative session with them. You can break the tasks down and you can get the shared knowledge from them. And with that shared knowledge, you can learn from each other. That's not the learning of as the process of that's learning from your mistakes is a different, but you can learn from people the shared knowledge from those different suppliers who may have more experience than you in a project of that type. But ideally the main contractors would lead this in a meaningful way. And what I mean by meaningful way is we've done analysis here ourselves. We've taken 25 projects. And of those 25 projects, we looked at the plans that were in place by the main contractors. And we deal with a good section of the main contractors, and we deal with them in the UK, we deal with them in Ireland. And we found that only like 70% of the plans that we had were really useless. They weren't there to track and plan. They were there to maintain order on the projects. They were there to almost as a controlling item, as the LDAs. They weren't there to actually get the job built. They were just, you're late, you're holding everything up, negative type stuff. And if you understand that you can keep that going, because you have to keep that going, there are a lot of people in the business who want to do that, you can still run the last planner system. You can still run a pull plan and not have that as your major overall project plan. I think that's what main contractors need to see. They're not going to put this up as their actual contractual construction plan if they don't want to. There is flexibility here, Richard, to use this as a main contractor to get the job done. Call it pull plan, call it whatever you want, and that can often be a barrier to main contractors because of the competitive confrontation element within our industry. Programs can often become a contractual item, and you really don't want something that's built around a constraint schedule where it says you didn't get this done. That's okay to not get things done all the time. Particularly on last planner, an awful lot of the stuff that we do is actually to find out what we can't get done. We're supposed to stretch ourselves a little bit past what we can achieve. We're supposed to, at the odd time, have overestimated things. You can't really have a planned activity at 80 or 90%. It's unrealistic. So you can't have those things feeding back into a contractual overall master plan. But they can still apply, main contractors can still apply and use this in an ability to get the area done, to hand over, to have no delays, to get the job handed over as early as possible. Does that make sense?
No, it does indeed. You made a couple of really interesting points there, Niall. One was obviously, given the nature of the way contracts in construction are set up, the program doesn't form a contract document. You have your start date and sectional completion, substantial completion dates within that, and there's flexibility for the main contractor. So it does highlight the value that lean construction and lean thinking and practice can bring to a contract when you got the contractor, the main contractor, supply chain, and all the parties involved applying those principles, because it enables you to move fairly quickly where things do shift and change. So you can see the real value that the last planner system can add, where it does provide that flexibility around planning and maximising the value and utilisation of your resources, particularly when there's always challenges on a program, there's always challenges on a site. So no, I think you've highlighted that extremely well. There's other questions come in here, and maybe probably links a little bit with the point you made the last time. It says, can you measure the value and benefits that the ready-made plan has delivered on designer projects?
Well, can you measure the benefits? The ready-made plan.
You measure the value, the value, the emphasis on the value.
Emphasis on the value.
Well, but the value to the designer group and maybe the project.
No, that's fine. I think measure the value is interesting. It gets our understanding of value out in the open, as in, you know, what we install, what you get paid for, what the client wants. That's value. An awful lot of these plans here at the final level, when you look at these things and you break them down, there's often a misconception that when you do a planned activity complete, when you give a figure for that, people think that's productivity. It's not. I mean, if you only did one task out of 10, that one task could have, in a magnitude of work, as in, you know, physical work, could be a far more difficult task than the other 9 tasks you didn't get done. And if you got that done, it may have moved. The productivity could have, you know, be quite good. The other tasks could be simpler tasks. But what you're doing is, the science behind it is, you're finding out what you're most frequently not good at, and you're trying to fix it. And you're trying to fix that as quickly as possible, identify these issues as quickly as possible, so that you're improving faster than your competition, faster than everybody else around you, faster than you were doing before. Your planned activity complete should increase, which means your ability to bring value to the client and plan to bring value has increased. So when you are a more reliable planner, you are approaching the stage of bringing value earlier and faster and to a larger part of the overall project. So that's how I would say the value is being impacted by, basically, you're focusing in on where you're not bringing value, and you're trying to eliminate it and fix it inside by standardizing the processes as much as you can and fixing them and tweaking them so that you bring value quicker, faster, and that your chances of achieving that task and obtaining and securing value increase. And the benchmark would be, you know, you gather this information over time, and you check it, you look at your planned activity complete, and you might set a task of increasing that. Obviously, we set out the danger before of it can be very easy to increase planned activity by including simple tasks. But that's what we have to do. We have to stick to the principles of the benchmark, and we have to be realistic. And there's an honesty in this whole thing about whether we're bringing value or not, because otherwise it'll just become like every other business process run by a PR machine to secure work, because you've fabricated a planned activity. You've fabricated features. If we really wanted to work, you have to do a benchmark, and you have to see if your plans are more reliable. You've eliminated waste. You've dealt with your most frequently occurring problem, and you want to bring value as early as possible.
Oh, I think you've answered that quite comprehensively. I mean, it does add a lot of value, both not just to the designer group and the supply chain when using, but also the client and the project. It's a win-win for everybody when you apply that thinking across the project. And there's a comment that's come in from one of our listeners who confirms they totally agree with the point you made about using Last Planner and some of the elements within that within the subcontract arrangement as well, because it does add value in addressing health, safety, quality, schedule, and cost issues on a project. So positive feedback there. Another question has come in from one of our listeners, if I use that term. The use of the Last Planner system in terms of the design information management and the application of that thinking. Obviously, what you've outlined there is how it might work on site, but can you see it being utilised in other areas of the construction process?
Most definitely. For us, if I could speak from experience, if we are managing the design, which means the design team has been novated over onto us, and this is where value comes from, and I'm going to just give a classic example that I think anybody, I know I'm going back to electrical engineering, but often consultant engineers will look at a delivery program based on, say, they've got to give you 200 drawings. You sign off on the amount of drawings that you're going to get. So you're in a building with 10 floors. And it's 10 different services, so you have 10 times 10, you have 100 drawings to produce. Often what you get is the first 10 drawings that you get back in is symbols and general details. They, probably 8 of the 10 were off the shelf, rebadged. The next 10 you probably get is the fire alarm, and you'll get the fire alarm from the basement all the way up to the 8th floor of the roof. even though you're not getting, even though you didn't necessarily ask for that. Then you might get the containment, and the containment will go in even before the lighting, because the lighting is difficult, but the containing drawings you think they're easy to do, but you actually haven't worked out all your services yet. So the containment is always reworked after. Containment and those things, they always get reworked. And there's various reasons for that, architects changing design, the whole lot. But as you move through this whole process and you see how drawings and how designs are delivered, they're often delivered on a per service basis. Now, if we apply Lean and we say, well, where do we get value from this? A Lean principle will say, listen, I don't want 10 fire alarm drawings this week, 10 containment drawings next week, 10 GS drawings the next week. Week after next, give me the ground floor and have the lighting, the fire alarm, the general services, the security, the control, the data, have all of those on them. In 2 weeks, give me one floor completed, or it depends on the size of the project, obviously. When you get that back, you will address a huge amount of the issues that you had per service before the engineering team wasted their time moving up through and repeating the mistakes that they made on the, not necessarily mistakes, that's a negative, but any issues or any errors that were made, they get repeated all the way up from the ground up to the roof. But if you address them at the ground floor issue early, break it up, small components, doable, a small task, and the consultants buy into this, because you're not asking them for a lot of work. So I only want one drawing, but I want 6 services on it. It's the equivalent to 6 to 10 drawings, but I want you thinking about all those services in a combined, almost a collaborative way of looking at services. So all your services come together at the same time, and they're not thinking of them in isolation. Now, on that, you have a constraint schedule, and we have successfully run constraint schedules on the design in a very similar way. We just took the constraint schedule that we have there, and instead of tasks, we put down design elements, and we went through those, and we said, do you have, and we changed some of them, because some of the stuff they need to draw in for, say, a fire alarm or a different services, they'd say, well, do you have the structural drawings? Do you have the architect's drawings? Do you have the BIM model? So whatever way that drawing is, but you can come up with your own constraints, and they're the barriers broken down that stop the design team from completing those different services and those different tasks. And it's a very, very, very useful tool. You combine it with where you want value yourself. You also combine the whole thing with phasing and breaking up the way you would with the installation into commissionable zones, areas that you can hand over early. You do the very same thing. Give me an area that you've designed completely that you think is going to work, and you'll identify the problems and reduce rework all the way up to those floors. By the time you're up onto the top 2 or 3 floors, most of your issues should be sorted out. But if you do a service from ground to first, you're going to repeat an awful lot of errors all the way up. That's the answer to that one anyway.
No, I think, and again, a comprehensive answer based on obviously the practical experience that yourselves have had on projects dealing with the construction design process. And the question has come in from someone sort of tied to that around managing the output from the design team in terms of production and information release and things like that. And you said there's no point getting the services drawings for the 4th floor in a building when you're still in the basement sort of stuff. So you can see where the working collaboratively with the design team, with the contractors and the supply chain to get that flow of information to support the construction program is absolutely key now. So
of course, I left that out, Richard. You're 100% right. During those meetings where you have your constraints meeting, if you're applying the full Lean practice, you should have your preferred suppliers in those meetings as well to help the design team and yourself, and you bring your shared knowledge to addressing those different issues. I left that out, correct?
Yeah, no, that's all part of the collaboration, and we've seen projects where collaboration has worked extremely well to overcome challenges, because they happen all the time on projects. I'm just conscious of time. There's one last question that's come in around: is there any software packages that designer group would use to manage the last planner and the elements of that on projects, or is it done in the hard copy format as we saw in the examples?
Well, we deal with that I know we talk about standardization, but some people understand Post-its and always paper on site, and you can move that way if that's the way they want to do it. I gave a little brief introduction there to Google Docs for setting those tasks. That's very, very useful. One thing that we found in all these, particularly in, say, processes and rerunning processes and reevaluating them and people in the room, certain things that other people have said, when you get people into a room, what do you use and how do you deal with them? I mean, the idea that when you have a meeting, that people, when they enter that meeting, they know they had tasks to do before they went into the meeting. Quite often in these processes, they try to use a substitute. They'll go, you know, and particularly in operations, operations can always have an excuse as to why they go, because they're so close to the client. So they can use a client excuse for not being at a meeting, and they put a proxy in their place who gets to say, listen, you know, I didn't do these different things. If you actually set out those tasks during the meeting, and something like that Google Docs one there that actually sends an email during the meeting to that person, when you're finished your meeting, your emails are all sent. So that person has the maximum amount of time to do it. So even if they do get somebody to come into the meeting, you know whether they've achieved the task or not, and you can speak to them afterwards and say, look, I know you weren't at the meeting, but you resolved all your tasks anyway. Or else you can say to them, I know you weren't at the meeting, and you had 10 tasks to resolve. You had a week to do it, and you didn't do any of them. So even if you were at the meeting, you still haven't, addressed what you were supposed to do. So it kind of takes that kind of no substitute as a rule, which is great, which you should always use if you can. But it also combats that when it does happen, it gives you a bit more information rather than an anecdotal kind of a way of going about it. So anything that can set a task during the meeting, send that invitation out and measure it, that go back onto the plan so that you're only dealing with issues. Anything you can do like that. I said even Google Docs is very simple, but up on the wall is perfect. It's visual, it's collaborative, and it doesn't shut down or it doesn't need power. So it's we would use a combination of both.
And I think it was one of the points that David and Paul raised last month around the interaction and the behaviours you get within the team when people are working things together. They're challenging, they're supporting each other, they're actually working in a collaborative way. And I think maybe with some software packages, you don't get that because you start a bit like managing by email. You don't get the real value in the interaction, sitting down and dealing with issues of people and mapping it out. So, but it's good to see it works. You can use both systems, the IT in terms of getting the assignments out and tracking those, but getting people into the room to actually plan and work the plan in the right way.
Could I rephrase that slightly, Richard? I would say that the IT can help focus your meetings, that you're talking about what you didn't do, what has to be done, rather than updating what you did do, because there's no real value in that, because it's done, and if you got it done and it's done, that's great. If you can use IT to help keep those meetings, those face-to-face meetings you spoke about, and the collaboration, keep those focused on what has to be done, well then I think that's a valuable piece of IT, and you can use it or not use it inside your system. But anything to keep that half-an-hour meeting about what has to be done, rather than somebody talking about what they did do for half of it and the great job they did, that really doesn't tackle, that's not planning, that's post-mortem stuff, So sorry for putting across you there.
No, absolutely, no, that's great. What I'll do, I've got another couple more coming through, but I am conscious of time, so I'll ask the last one, and it sort of links maybe with the other one. Does Designer Group use the last planner elsewhere within its business to manage other business activities?
I would
procurement of lead time items or things like that, where you got critical procurement activities or business processes you've got to hit that are time dependent.
Well, I would say that we would use lean business processes. So we wouldn't measure value of, say, order production in the FM business, where value is really service, and are you trying to get the guy a better price, or does he want his issue? Does your client want the issue fixed within 3 hours, or do they want you to get the part for €250, or would they rather you be late by 4 hours and charge them €200 for the part because you drove to Cork, or if you're in Cork, you drove to Dublin to buy it, So we would use different tools there. We would analyze those things. We would certainly do value to waste exercises on different processes, even invoice checking. We would do a plan, do, check, act exercise and invoice checking. The most similar one we do would be the design process that I explained. We've used that, and we've got more case studies on that as well, and we have that to explain to the other members of the engineering team. This is a great way to run your own engineering requirements, and also if we have an overview of a design, to run that as well. So definitely the constraint schedule comes in there on the design side. You'd lift it out of the last planner system, use it, and maybe just change some of the headings.
Okay, now listen, that answer, and thanks for sharing that with us. Now I look to bring our webinar to a conclusion, this one anyway. We will be having another webinar next month. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that. But if I could take the opportunity to thank you, Niall, for putting together the presentation and appreciate all you've done in that regard. December's webinar is going to be titled The Last Planner, Preparing the Pull Plan to Ensure Programme Delivery. And that will be held on the 13th of December. And that will be the second in our trilogy of webinars building on the last planner session we had with David and Paul in September. So hopefully you'll be all able to join us with that and register when the details come out. What I'd like to take advantage of just a little bit is a Lean Construction Ireland's community event. Our quarterly event will be on the 30th of November. It's being sponsored by DIT and Arup and will be held in Bolton Street, the title of which is The Alignment of Client and Supply Chain to Enable the Successful Delivery of Lean Projects. So hopefully you'll be all able to come along to that. Our keynote speaker is David Umstadt. He's over in California. So hopefully you can come along to that, and details of that are on our website. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Box Media, our communications and media partner, Lean Construction Ireland, for facilitating the webinar. Thank Niall again for his presentation, and thank you all on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland for joining us online, and look forward to you joining us again at the next webinar and our community event at the end of the month. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Who's this? Mr. Kelly. Right. Shampoo 7, 8 today. MMA. What's this? Sure. See below. Who is Shane? Stephen Kelly. Who's this Stephen Kelly? Right. Just December long. Honestly, that's okay. Stephen Kelly, Stephen Kelly. Stephen Kelly is Kelly Banks' name. Yeah, Stephen Kelly, lovely. MMA consulting. Goody. Shane.